Good morning, everyone. Hello.
Guess we're waiting on Scott to show up here. So, question I have while we wait, Toddy, on the background of this, was this coming out of the ORAS group itself? I feel like I saw that you had submitted the doc over in the ORAS meeting notes a while back.
Sorry, I missed the question. Can you repeat that?
Did the stuff that Scott's coming to talk about today with the new app delivery group, did that come out of ORAS? Because I feel like I saw that you were the one that was pushing that doc over on the ORAS team earlier.
Yeah, that kind of came out of us. The original kind of discussion that we wanted to have was more about search and filtering. Surprisingly, to me, this grew into something bigger right now. So I am not completely sure about the scope because it was driven by Scott and I think Scott, and who was the guy who submitted it to the TAC application delivery. I forgot his name. So I didn't pay attention for the last couple of weeks, and it seems that the document changed quite a bit from what I originally was expecting. So yeah. And I think Jason, you are also there in that document, right? So I think you, Saji, and I, we had the question, okay, what is now the scope of this effort that TAC app delivery wants to drive? Is that part of the agenda, Brandon?
It's the main item on the agenda. And so Scott had put it there under his name, but I don't see him here, and we're 5 after. So I don't know if yourself, Sajay, or anyone else wants to take it up on that one.
I am not sure that I can provide the latest kind of status and scope for that. So if Scott put it, I would say he's the right person to talk about that. As I said, so I have not paid too much attention. I was kind of on the original discussion when we were discussing the search and filtering. And that's started from there. That's what we wanted to kind of work on in ORAS. But we kind of couldn't get agreement whether we should create a working group under ORAS. And Scott took it and said, let's do that under TAC delivery, app delivery.
Okay, while we wait for him to show up, do we want to hit some of the other items on the agenda? Thinking of things like 1043, adding the artifact type to image manifest. We still need some reviews on that one. I'm happy to share if that's easier for folks. A few windows around first. And then please shout if you see Scott join. So yeah, this one's been open for a little bit. I know it's kind of been the blocker for us to get things moved to the next step. Oh, I see Scott just joined. Should I go ahead and turn it over? We were going to continue on some other items while we waited for you to show up, Scott, but since you're here, I think you're the man of the hour.
Thanks, Brandon. Okay, great. Well, hi, everyone. I don't know how many of these people here are people that I know. I see a few people like Aaron, Jason, but in any case, hello, I'm Scott Rigby. I am I'm part of a few different working groups and co-maintain a few projects in CNCF, including Flux and Helm, and I co-chair the GitOps working group, and I'm helping with the initiative around improving some of the OCI artifact functionality within different applications in the CNCF projects, and like trying to help coalesce those if we can within that area. So anyway, that's me, and let me just. I was going to join a little bit later, but I heard my ears were burning. So give me a second while I open the doc. Does someone have a link to that handy, by the way? I have it open with about never mind, I found it. Okay, yeah, so basically, we're still looking at the agenda list in the HackMD. Is that right?
Yep, got your agenda, and then you linked over to the issue 368 in the working group, and that also opens up a Google Doc in there as well.
Great. Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah. So if you all want to take a look at that, I think there might have been a little bit of confusion about whether or not we were suggesting, like starting a working group in CNCF in order to update the distribution spec or things like that, which would be kind of weird since OCI has working groups, a concept of working groups. But that's not the goal. The goal is to try to refine how applications can best search for artifacts, right? Well, at least that's one of the main work products of the working group right now. One of the first work products that we did before it was even really a working group was just improve and finish OCI, like a 1.0.0 version of the ORS project within CNCF, so that Helm could update and we could push OCI as a full feature within Helm. I don't know how many of you are Helm users, but that's kind of a big deal for a lot of folks. And I know that Helm is one of the widest used OCI artifacts out there right now, although, I think we all hope, or it seems very likely that will continue to increase across projects. But in any case, the very first work product right now is to improve being able to find basically discover and search those artifacts. And so the initial thought was, oh my gosh, should we update? Should we try to work with OCI to update the distribution spec? And so far, it seems like that might not be necessary because there's discussion about using the extensions feature of OCI now. But in any case, even if the conclusion is drawn, oh my gosh, we really can't do this without that, we would come back to OCI and work with you all for any proposed changes in the distribution spec. So I hope that's clear. I'm really just addressing some of the comments here. And we'd really love to get all of your feedback.
Don't everyone jump at once.
I guess I'll go first. Hi, Scott. I don't know if we've ever met in anything but GitHub issue comments.
Yeah.
I don't really. I think the plan sounds good. I think the only thing that worries me about the plan is that part of it, there is a possible confusion, even if the plan goes exactly according to plan, there's possible confusion among consumers of the plan to conflate the things. The only, like, to conflate CNCF things and OCI things. The only thing we have to safeguard against that is our own discipline and our own like vocabulary discipline, and calling people out when they say OCI artifacts or CNCF artifacts and saying that's not a thing. What you mean is this other thing. So I just want to.
I'm so sorry. Has anyone described them as CNCF artifacts, or is that just kind of like we're worried
that was a made up thing, right?
Okay.
I guess by all means you are allowed to call them CNCF artifacts. I'm on the OCI side, and so I can't tell you what to call them or not call them. I think all of my feedback on any part of the plan is that we just need to be disciplined about what we call them so that it's clear. OCI allows me, Jason the person, to make the JSON OCI extension that deals with an object called artifacts, and like that means that there is no OCI artifacts in this scheme. There's like 6 OCI artifacts, but there should not be a 7th. Is my summary. So the plan sounds good. I like the plan. I just want to reiterate for probably the 9th time that we need to be disciplined about what we call it and how we position it.
That makes sense
but
to
otherwise
me.
Good.
That makes sense to me. And I just wanted to ask if, oh, actually, I'm so sorry. I'm like jumping in and I see a hand raised.
No, I just threw it up thinking, thank you. Go ahead and follow up.
Okay, it was just, if we could have, it seems like there's some folks who can help, who are interested in cross-pollination here. Some people that join the OCI, at least I've seen some people, for example, Aaron, who are always here in this meeting and who are on the interested parties list for that working group for app delivery within CNCF. So hopefully we can have some cross-pollination there to make sure that we keep the conversation alive. And I was just wondering if you all feel that that sounds good, and Aaron, if you'd be willing to help with that, or if there's anyone else who'd be willing to help with that.
I am not a maintainer, so I don't think I'm the right person to ask on the OCI side. I just am an interested party in OCI as well.
Gotcha.
So the comment I was going to throw there was when I see the use of extensions, the value that I thought of when we were originally creating extensions was that it gave a really good place for registry operators, whether it's ACR, Hub, Harbor, whoever's got their own registry, to say, here's an extension we're making for our registry, and it might interact with our tooling. It might be a Docker Hub client that talks to specifically that API. Once we get to the point that we're saying we want to make something that is generic across a lot of different spaces, it feels like the extension might not be the right place to find that. I feel like we want to get to more of a standard of saying this is an interface we want to create for everybody, all the registries interoperate with, for all the clients to talk to that. And once you start saying that language, it to me feels like it's a lot more on the OCI side than trying to build it out as a private extension over on the other side.
Okay.
Brandon, I think you and I had different interpretations of what extensions were. Not incompatibly so, but I think you and I had the same model, except like, Brandon's registry invents a new API to do something, and then it's good and there are good clients. And so Jason's registry also implements that API to do the same thing using the same structure. And then Aaron's makes his own, has his own registry and does the same, adopts that API, and now there's sort of a center of gravity around it. Less about, certainly if it was a Docker Hub only functionality that you needed a Docker account to use, Aaron's API is not going to adopt that. So that won't happen. But if it is general purpose enough, then it could gain a center of gravity and people would move around it. I think the reason I would not want that in OCI is that it's a bit, 2 reasons. One is it's a bit easier to say we don't support that. That's not part of OCI. OCI specifications and conformance is the bare minimum platform of things that all registries should support, but this is optional additional functionality that your client might not support. One nice thing about extensions is it's really easy for a client to detect. We made it was designed so that clients could easily detect whether that was supported or not, instead of like probing URL endpoints to see if it was a 404 or a 403. So I think that is a benefit of the OCI extension model. If in 3 years, every registry on the planet has the same set of OCI extensions, I consider that a win. All right, like we've all moved the ecosystem forward using this incremental partial adoption approach. I don't necessarily know whether, if that's the case, if every registry supports the same set of OCI extensions, if that means they should be contributed back into OCI as like governed by those specs. I don't know. That'd be a great problem to have, right? Answering that question would be very exciting, but I'm going to assume that won't necessarily happen, at least not that fast.
Yeah, I think my thought about it is the extension model is a way that parties can, like with IATF, draft, and work on, iterate on a proposal, and we can have different versions of that proposal and not have OCI necessarily have to standardize something and then for us to then regret maybe what we standardized. And when there's actually that sort of center of gravity, when enough registries have decided this is actually a really sort of good functionality, or this is what we might consider table stakes or something like that, then maybe it would also make sense for OCI to also say, we're going to sort of freeze this extension, or we're going to adopt this extension or something. I think it's a good problem to think about in the future, is building features that so many people want to use, that people are, beating down the door of OCI saying, we want this to be part of OCI 2.x or something. That would be indicative of a huge amount of value being produced. But I think that's pretty far out as well. I don't think that's anything that's going to happen in the near term.
Trying to understand a couple of the claims reading your documentation for the goals and the reason for putting the group together. I noticed in there it says one thing that sort of surprised me, that the OCI TOB had denounced creating any support for APIs and such around artifacts for images. I find that surprising. And then the goals here seem to list out, like, APIs for doing search for artifacts, things like that are already in the distribution API spec pull request. So I think maybe there wasn't enough conversation with the OCI TOB or the OCI, maintainers. Maybe we need to talk some more. Maybe we need to put some more maintainers in the tag. I'm a little surprised, that just saying, and reading your goals and what you're trying to put together. We put an extension API there, but it wasn't to replace the API. If that makes sense. I agree with the goals. We need these goals implemented. The goal of OCI was to create a standard for doing this type stuff, right? Common images, the images grew now into artifacts. I think we haven't eschewed, if you will, artifacts. So maybe there was a little bit of a disconnect. I don't know, but we need more people to work together. It's open source. Let's work together. Let's figure out. We do work groups. So you guys have tag work groups. Maybe we need to do a common or combine the effort, right? But we don't have all the answers yet. That's true, and that's for sure. Thanks for listening.
by the way, thanks, Mike, is I think that note about artifacts, about the work of artifacts being the hope for that to be done within CNCF. That, I guess that interpretation was by one of the tag leads, the app delivery tag leads within CNCF, and it sounds like there's other interpretations of that. I just wonder if maybe someone on the call who worked on I just remember, okay, so I wasn't very involved in the artifacts work. I was working on the Helm team, but not directly on the OCI support when it first was starting. I think that was mainly Josh Delitsky, if any of y'all, I don't know if he's been
no, Josh, yeah, sure,
around recently, and Matt Farina and a few other.
Yeah, no, Matt.
Yeah, and okay, so I wasn't around during that, Mike, and I definitely don't want to make any assumptions.
We probably played the telephone game. It happens. I know Matt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
an artifact definition for Helm. I know, and he was not happy with the speed of progress. Like,
right.
Nor are we.
I understand. Yeah, and I definitely don't imagine that just because that took, like, I don't know, 3 years or something, that's like the speed that we should expect.
Exactly. No.
Yeah.
We need to do better. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, but what I seem to understand from others is that during that process, there was a feeling within the OCI maintainers of like, woof, this artifact stuff. I mean, we love a lot of what happened. We support this, but this really is not what we want our focus to be. And the people that are actually using that are in the application community, and it seemed like the ORAS project belonged within CNCF for various reasons, and that was the place where a lot of that work should be done.
Yep.
So I think that's one of the other reasons we thought, oh, we should be kind of like in a tight feedback loop with that project as they're in some kind of a sub-project actually trying to implement test code and to see if we could kind of make something like this work. What do you think about that as someone who was there?
I think it's everybody, or not everybody, but yes, there were quite a few groups that were circling around the horn for who was going to be the first to come up with the API. That everybody was going to implement as a standard. And that's generally how this happens until the standard happens, right?
Yeah. Okay.
No, that's fair. Now I understand the context of the statements that are written in the chart.
And maybe they're not written well. Maybe we can update those. And actually, Mike, because you have experience here in your because of your experience,
a little bit of experience on the ORAS side, we can ask some other people to help and try to understand that different. I just don't want it to read something that was from not exactly from Chris Angst, for example, who's running OCI, sorry, saying something that's happening over here.
Absolutely. We can adjust, we can totally edit that document. It's a draft. So
okay, cool.
That's a good
thing. And then figure out, we'll get on the tag, I guess. Brandon Mitchell, hopefully, will get on the tag and join in and figure out how we can merge this. We had a work group. We disbanded it because we thought we were done.
Right. So I think that's the main thing, is that we're seeing the adoption of the OCI, and to be clear, like, there's no interest in renaming them anything but OCI artifacts.
Well,
that is what we're talking about.
You understand why, of course. I mean, we don't have support for the extensions yet in the client tools. So if you go down that route, you'd be, shoehorned into registries that are supporting an extension that hasn't been released in an actual official specification yet. It's only been in a proposed branch. So I'm probably talking too much.
Well, I also probably am. I was just trying to help with the context.
No, this is good.
What we're trying to do, and very open-minded. just want to unblock folks from being able to work on some of the work products that are needed, which is one of the big ones, at least for me, is search and discovery to start. But I know there are other improvements.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if the API the work group put together for search is sufficient for your cases. If it's not, we're not finished, so we can continue to extend and enhance.
So can I ask the question of whether it's, because I heard some really good proposals discussed and in the chat about the idea of extensions being a testing ground for seeing if there's interest in opting into certain functionality before it moves upstream into OCI officially. Is that something that I'm kind of hearing something from you, and I'm not sure if I'm interpreting right, but is that something that
I think it's Vince's turn to talk.
Okay.
Since I'll jump in just because I have my hand up, but also because since I originally threw the chaos grenade out there saying that was more of a registry specific thing, I'll walk that one back. Understandably, everybody's got very valid points in there that it's not registry specific. I was throwing out more of like a use case for where extensions make a lot of sense. We also use them as a testing ground. We implemented the refers API. So in that working group, as we were coming out of the response there, we used an extension API so we could do our development in a namespace. And then we brought it up to OCI. That whole path changes at that point, because now we're moving up to a different API that OCI is standardizing around. And so something to be careful of is that you don't get too far down the coding and development of using something like that if that's your plan of action. If your thought is we're going to develop this in a test ground and then deliver it to OCI, realize that all the tooling you're writing that uses that extensions API is going to have to change that API reference, that endpoint reference. John, go ahead.
Something that I think is important to consider, and I think was one of the reasons I pushed back on a lot of the artifacts working group output, is that if you want something to be ubiquitous, you either need to use what is already there or convince everyone to implement it. And so it would be good early to have some point of contact with most of the large registry operators, get everyone on board and aware of this effort before we start making decisions and taking dependencies on something that may or may not be ubiquitous, right? Adding a GraphQL API, for example, right? Like that does not exist today. And so if we wanted one that everyone supports, then it's going to be a lift to get everyone to implement that for every registry. So very early on, I would say, get folks who could implement that, say like cloud registry operators, to just be aware of this effort. But in terms of like actually implementing something, yeah, I'd say like go fast, just be prepared to throw away or change things when you come back to OCI and say like, hey, can we actually make this part of OCI too, so that we all implement it the same way. That's my only warning, is like, if we want this ubiquitous, everyone needs to somehow get involved. And like, some people don't participate in these meetings. Some people don't read the OCI mailing list or subscribe to the OCI repos. So like, it's a lot of work to actually get everyone involved. But we have to do it if you want this to be supported everywhere.
I can't raise my hand. I have no idea why. My hand's up. I'll go whenever. Just I can't figure out how to turn it on.
The floor is yours.
All right. Yeah, it's from someone who's been on, doing a lot of the work and these pushing on the tag app delivery side of things. We understand that if it ever comes back to OCI, you're never going to get acceptance saying, "Oh, go ahead and take our food, eat it, and enjoy it." It's more of a, maybe you like what we have, but you might want ketchup on it instead. So we understand that there's going to be some, evolution of whatever work outcome comes out of it. And we welcome that. And we want your thoughts, because we don't know what the hell we're doing half the time.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great from the consumer side to know what we need or what they need. Because we're bringing together 3 different groups, right? There's the consumers, and then registry operators, and then standards body people. So yeah, I would say your responsibility would be, here's what we need. And then we take this to registry people, say, what can you do? And then we find some middle ground, and then we standardize on the lowest common denominator that gets everybody not happy, but useful.
And somehow we've made world peace, and we can all go kumbaya.
Hopefully.
That would be nice. Yeah. When I think about the higher level goal that you have of how do we search for content that's on our registry, there are 3 different places we're looking at doing that now already today. And one, if you have an individual image and you say, I want to search for all the artifacts point to that image, we've got the Reverse API. We've been working on so hard. If you're looking at what's the content inside of a specific repo, the tag listing API needs work. I think there's a general desire within the OCI itself to extend that tag listing API to say, give us back full descriptors, give us back untagged manifest, give us more detail there, what's in a repository, and to have some API for that. And then beyond that, you've got the catalog API, which has notoriously been a challenge. And I feel like you're getting ready to walk into that landmine. I feel like you're saying what is outside of just one repo, a whole bunch of repos. And it's something that we know that we want to search on. We want to add some kind of interface to do some kind of listing or search or query across multiple repos. But realize that when we walk into that landmine, we have pretty much everything in registries today has auth defined and scoped specifically to individual repositories. And so you quickly get into negotiating with a lot of people that have implemented auth differently, but have all implemented it specifically in one scenario that they planned on implementing it, because that's how Docker worked. And so you're going to want to get a lot of people in the room to discuss how you can sort that out.
Yeah, from a Helm use case, from end users, the functionality from basically, there are generally many packages within a Helm repository. That's kind of the language of it, right? And then, but within OCI, a repository is specific to one package and all the versions of that one package. So the language is a little bit confusing, I think, for some people. If any of you aren't that familiar with the Helm side of things for Kubernetes, maybe everyone is, but I just wanted to make that clear. So yes, I think it does sound very much like, I don't know all the ins and outs of the catalog search, but essentially what we have right now for a Helm, we could even call it a registry for now, in a way, because all of the packages for each application that you want to deploy inside of Kubernetes would all live inside of that same registry or that same catalog. And with Helm now, with the traditional HTTP registries, which we call Helm repositories, there's really just a giant index file, and that thing just grows and grows and grows. And obviously that is not ideal. And that's one of the reasons that people are turning to OCI, because we built that functionality in, or that functionality was built in quite a while ago, and we recently pushed that over the finish line to be a full feature, because many people were just using it as if it were a full feature already. It's just the community need for it is so enormous that I don't want to claim that it's single-handedly made the case for artifacts in OCI, but it sort of sounds like it was top of list, probably by a lot to start. So the thing that you can do with Helm right now, so when you're installing applications like Kubernetes, is you can search that catalog or that registry for the different applications. And then you can go into each of those applications or each of those packages, sorry, those artifacts or whatever, and say, or I guess they would be artifact OCI repos, and say, let me see the list of versions. Let's see those list of tags. And so I think that that maps pretty cleanly. So if does that sound like the
it maps real cleanly? Let me give you a little bit of the history.
Yeah.
I don't know it all. People probably correct me and know a lot better than I do. But the catalog API was originally in the distribution spec, and Docker had on their side. But instantly when they make Docker Hub, they don't enable that. And it's because when you think about the catalog listing of all the repositories on something like Docker Hub, there are a whole lot of repos out there. So that would be a very long listing. That would probably never end. But
okay.
B, the other really important thing is that it has a lot of private repos everywhere, a lot of individual users' namespaces. They don't have public images. And so you quickly get into, how do I handle the auth request that can query and say to the auth server, give me access to query all these things? It becomes a very complicated problem for people that are writing the authentication servers. And so they just quickly threw up their hands and said, unless you're some kind of registry administrator, you don't have access to this API or something along those lines. So taking their issues they face there and then trying to model that over, you've already said, you get that big long index and it just becomes too huge. We got the same problem historically on OCI. And so they just immediately threw up their hands and just turned it off. Toddy?
Yeah, actually, I agree with you on the catalog stuff. By the way, GHCR right now lists the full catalog, and if you do a list on that, it's just a nightmare. But I wanted kind of to maybe give our perspective, or more specifically my view on where we and why I was kind of initially involved in driving this discussion until Scott took it over and kind of he drove it into the TAG Hub delivery stuff. We were looking for a much deeper search capabilities than we currently have. And honestly, we are kind of starting to see some limitations, let's say, on even on the referrer APIs, right? Because one thing is to go and find something in a big catalog, right? We don't want to actually go and list the catalog, then browse the JSON, use JQ and so on to find the thing. But we're looking for to index also based on certain types, right? We have a prototype implementation right now in ACR that actually I can go and search by dates, something that the referrer API does not give me as capability right now. Sorting the things and saying, I want the last published thing from this, because we add multiple referrer types to, let's say, an image, right? And you go and update, whether it's annotation, whether something else changes, and we would like to get the latest one because that's the most actual. Brandon, I think you remember this lifecycle discussion that we had on one of the issues with Canonical folks. You participated there. So it's not just like getting the catalog and getting a couple of referrers. I talk with customers that they say now, we're going to push all these SBOMs. I don't want to go and store the index of the SBOMs in some other storage now. They come back and say, can I go and find every image that has log4j214? No, you cannot right now. And I don't think that this will be available anytime soon, but maybe it's something that we want to think about. So that's kind of some of the use cases that I'm looking at to maybe enable in, I don't know, you mentioned 5 years in the chat.
We can always one up ourselves to go slower.
So I think basically the reason that we want to be having these conversations with you anyway, and the reason we're having it right now is because of the goal to form a working group of some kind. It's true what Toddy was saying, that the idea was, could it be a sub-project of ORAS that's focused on this? And we just kind of work on an extension and we just try to prove this, test this out and prove this out and leave it at that. And, or not leave it at that, but let's start with that. And yes, that can definitely happen. The idea though of having more stakeholders within the different CNCF apps that aren't just related to ORAS, like for example, Artifact Hub, which I don't know if you all know about that, but it's kind of a central discovery project for CNCF of packages of different kinds for basically every application or every type of application and platform related thing. There are many, many different, not just applications, but things like rules for your platforms and so on, like all of that. They are and can be artifacts of different types, but they don't all share a common specification. They're not all using OCI artifacts or supporting it. We would like them to, and we would like to help use the new artifact type. Well, not that new, but the newer artifact type field that's added, so that people don't have to add their own, like INA, a registered media types like we did with Helm. That was not easy, and I know that there was a reason why you wanted that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, dynamic schema registration. So basically, I guess the point here, what I'm trying to say is that we have a need to explore this one way or another, and we do want to pair together. Amy from Linux Foundation said, hey, I happen to know that there's going to be an OCI event at KubeCon in Amsterdam in a few weeks. I'm personally going to be there. I don't know how many other folks in this call are going to be there, but that's exciting. And so she was saying, hey, really before starting a working group within CNCF, just talk to the OCI people to make sure that that it makes sense and that you're not somehow misaligning. So I think that's our main goal, or that was my main goal of putting the agenda item on here, is to say, on one hand, we could just simply say, okay, we're doing this working group to explore. We're definitely not trying to tread on OCI territory, like reinvent any OCI processes or somehow confuse the landscape by having different names using the same name for different things. But we do want to explore this and do what Toddy's talking about, and really just one way or another try to see how we can help that to happen. And invite you all to join that too. And I wonder if that would be, given all the discussion so far, like Brandon, for example, I wonder if that would be kind of good enough for now and say, hey, listen, we're going to start joining each other's meetings a bit and discussing this kind of functionality and moving ahead. Or do you feel like we're still blocked on that in some way, like it would be unclear where we should have a group?
Since you called me out, I'll answer the question that I don't want to say you're blocked in any way.
Okay.
That this is me personally, so not saying on behalf of all of OCI, but I'm happy to see people develop wherever they want to get something developed and to make progress. And so I'm not in any way want to be a roadblock on there. I just want to, the point I was making earlier was that if you want to see something that's a standard that's adopted by multiple clients, multiple registries, stuff like that, that I feel like we're a good place to come and have that conversation.
So I'm new to a lot of these things on many different sides. I do struggle a little bit with the purpose in the artifacts charter, the working group charter, and maybe calling out more explicitly like some of the problem statements would be helpful for me. And it's it feels kind of generic, like the abundance of package types and formats, adding complexity and confusion. Like, I don't know what, like, there's a lot of package types that exist today. And a lot of the clients there's like a one-to-one relationship between a client and a package type. And I don't know how or why that's a problem. And like, a lot of people are doing things with what exists today. Now, when I look down to the like the proposed activities or potential work, like the search and discovery definitely fits very well into the OCI, or like getting feedback from the OCI group makes a lot of sense for that. When I think of more generic things like security, then my head kind of explodes of like, all right, well, there's the OpenSSF doing all sorts of work in supply chain security, specifically in the securing software repositories group. Then I think about the complexity and the number of things I've seen pop up around attestations between SALSA and the idea of a SALSA build provenance, and using a CNCF project like in Toto. But then when we like slightly step out from that into SBOMs, like then it explodes even more. And so like, is there a problem specific to supply chain metadata that we would like to see solved in a way that could apply to all different package types? I think that would be a really interesting conversation to have. I don't know how many people in this group are interested about that conversation. And the like, it quickly spans 3 different foundations at least, and many different working groups. I also contribute with the CNCF tag security group. And so like with that hat, I have one physical hat on, I have many different philosophical hats on. So I don't know, this is a long way of saying I'm super interested in all of this. I think there's a lot of complexity and potential directions where this work goes. And so I'm interested to hear like how we organize that and how we make sure that like this is just one of many interested parties, being like OCI. And so I'm happy to bring as many of those things and wear as many of those hats to these calls as possible.
All right, before I go, does anyone want to have a response to that? Mine is on a little bit different topic.
Yeah, John, I think my response to that is, I feel like we're not being ambitious enough in some of these spaces where we're having to reinvent the wheel in terms of how to attach an SBOM or how to attach an attestation to something over and over again. And I would really like, and this is just my own perspective, this isn't potentially participation in WG artifacts or OCI or anything like that, but can we nudge, or can we figure out how to make an OCI registry expansive enough that it could be used as an NPM package repository, that it could be used as a PyPy backend, that it could be used as, I look at a tool like JFrog Artifactory, right, which is almost essentially the gold standard for how you do internal package management and understanding your security landscape in an enterprise. And they have 30, 40, 50 integrations with different sort of protocols that they have to support. That's a huge matrix of things to figure out how to attach SBOMs to all of those things, how to attach an in-toto attestation to how that thing was built to all of those things. But an OCI artifact or an image that's an artifact, whatever, with an SBOM attached, that is really clear to me, and we could build common protocols. I really want to think about how we can build something that works for packages and package authors, and also to enable the next sort of generation of tooling, right? Like the next hot programming language, they're going to have to build their own registry, right? That's basically table stakes now for every new programming language, every new project, is to figure out how to build a registry. Can OCI and possibly WG artifacts sort of define, like, here's how you do it, and you don't have to buy into all of these features. You don't have to publish SBOMs right out the gate, but can you adopt this and then incrementally add those features and have a uniform way that interoperates with all of the tooling that enterprises already have, because every enterprise already has some sort of internal OCI registry, also some sort of internal package manager. This is a uniform way of getting there. And I think that's really exciting to me. It's much more exciting to me than trying to solve this at one registry at a time, one NPM, one PyPy at a time. Can we solve this once and build something robust that scales to, something as small as a new project, but also to as large as something like Docker Hub or GHCR?
I work with customers everywhere, and what do they all have in common these days? They have a registry. They may have Nexus, they may have Artifactory, but they have a registry. The reason why I got into this space is because I was an avid Helm user, and standing up a distributed Helm capability was a pain in the ass if you're familiar with Helm, because you had to deal with HTTP, endpoints. And it's like, I don't want to deal with that. I want to just be able to throw my damn Helm chart in a damn registry and call it a day. That's why, very much just like you just said, Aaron, I want to be able to put everything in a damn OCI registry, call it a day, and be able to search and use it effectively. That's it. And that's why I have been really focused on working with the community to help enable these type of capabilities.
Unrelated to anything, I was just going ahead and getting all the Zoom uploading stuff ready and uploading last week's, and I was literally at the box where it says, have to check it every time. Is this made for kids? And then Andrew, it made me smile a lot.
I try.
I think, Derek, was it you that had the other topic?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment about some of the procedural stuff talked about at the beginning about who owns what in terms of working groups and OCI. I still want to see, I kind of said this last week, but I want to see the creation of more working groups, more tightly scoped in OCI. I think just because there's a working group in one of the tags or SIGs or somewhere else, doesn't mean we can't have the output of those. They can't be stakeholders in creating working groups in OCI. So for any of these efforts, I think it makes sense to have that working group. Otherwise, we're all just going to come back here every week and kind of semi-discuss the same topic with no deliverables. So I think having something scoped and some deliverable around artifacts makes sense. It was kind of brought up earlier with in the chat about the working group we had before, which was really the referrers working group and was tightly scoped to that. And the output of that it's kind of like artifacts kind of squeaked in. And then we didn't quite figure out where it's going to go from there. But I think having something that's specifically tied to, we want this artifact manifest, we want a working group, we have it tightly scoped to that, and that makes more sense. And the discovery, that can be a separate working group. We don't need to try to do them all in one again. We have an artifacts working group, and then we're oh, we also want to do discovery, let's get that in. I think it makes sense to have those tightly scoped at the OCI level. Higher up, I think it makes sense for those tags to have their own kind of higher level discussions, but at least something that's scoped to OCI, scoped to specific output. I think it's more beneficial for OCI. We're not a generic prototyping group. We're hey, there's the very specific thing people are using and want. Let's figure out how we actually standardize that. And the same goes for if there's if we're doing some sort of discovery, we need to have something that's start with some sort of prototype and we can standardize it, not just these open-ended discussions that really can go on forever with everybody's opinion. Yeah, I'll stop talking.
Aaron, you were first.
Yeah, I just want to say I completely agree. I don't think that there needs to be a tight coupling between the process of a CNCF group and OCI, right? That I think within CNCF, it's common for working groups to be relatively long-lived and have, you know, multiple sort of outputs, but each of those outputs could individually be its own OCI matter. I think there's a reasonable, I think going back to earlier in the call, I don't think OCI would want to immediately standardize anything that the tag said is our output, right? There's a incubation period. There's figuring out what registries want to adopt and consider palatable before it definitely becomes an OCI standard. So I would hope that we can be loosely coupled so that we can move quickly in the WG artifacts space, but also continue to communicate back the proposals and ideas and progress on extensions and things like that.
Yeah, I think to second what you're saying, Derek, I'm a strong fan of more and smaller and more rapidly iterating working groups. I think the biggest reason we've avoided doing that so far is that just bandwidth. The people that are implementing a lot of this stuff only want to go to so many meetings in a week. And so trying to spin up a whole lot of working groups all at once simultaneously is terrifying to me personally. But yeah, definitely a hard agree that more and smaller working groups is a good plan.
Maybe just one last comment. Aaron, I really like the philosophical argument that you're making. However, we end up in this interesting overlap of what is the lowest common denominator, and to make it as generic as possible of like, not every artifact may exist inside of a registry, and not every artifact may even be cloud native. Like if we want to say that, and so that's where it's like, from the scope though of CNCF, it has to be cloud native. Some things in OpenSSF are not at all cloud native or other things. Like so we end up in this weird multiple circle Venn diagram of like what's in the middle, and is there even an overlap between some of these things, and just the history of a lot of language specific package management systems. Like I would love, like, it'd be much easier to just throw them away rather than try and bring them along to a cloud native registry based implementation.
Yeah, I completely agree. There is a degree of philosophical idealism in what I said earlier. No, more than just a little degree. There was quite a bit. And pragmatically, you're not going to get all of these language package managers into OCI, right? Or at least anytime soon. But the way I think about these things is that the vast majority of things that will ever exist is in our future, right? The next hot language, the next cool thing that we want to deploy to all of our data centers or our apps is going to come next, right? And can we build a foundation for them to participate in supply chain security out the gate, rather than have them build their own bespoke N+1th registry, which requires its own bespoke N+1th implementation of all of these things. I think it's really exciting to me that we could build something that is scalable to the next new package manager, the next app, the next thing that needs a registry. And that's what I want to focus on.
Cool. Well, we're at time. Had an awesome conversation. I appreciate everybody that went through all the great conversations there. I do want to throw two little quick agenda things in there. The two open PRs that we've got still. Also, third thing, welcome Tiana, new maintainer. Awesome. Appreciate, welcome aboard. And then higher up in the thing for our KubeCon EU, there is a link to the HackMD over there. So if you've got topics you want to discuss during that event, fill out that as well. And with that, thanks for putting up with us for a whole hour, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
This is fantastic.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Kudos
Scott.
to everyone here for discussing something new for a week.
We'll see you at the tag meeting.
Great meeting.
Cheers all.
Okay, cool. Bye.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Good luck. KubeCon.